Hi everyone, I'm back again, and today I'm going to be doing the Synastry chart between Ariana Grande and Ethan Slater. If you need a Synastry chart done, my email is in the description box. The first thing that I noticed in his natal chart, he has Zeus conjuncting his sun at 0 degrees. You can't get tighter than that. And this is an indication of a natural born cheater. Big time. He also has Venus in Gemini, and they can be very flirty. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, her Casanova and Pan conjuncts his sun. So he fell for her charms, and she brought music into his life. Because Pan has to do with music and also having a good time. Her swindle conjuncts his south node. Whatever conjuncts your south node from the other person, these energies will come to you and you'll feel comfortable with those energies. And it's his south node. So she brought deception into this relationship in some way. I don't have them here to validate that. You know, when I do charts for clients, I get validation, but I'm doing this without any feedback. But if I was going to pinpoint it, I would have to say the deception coincides with the fact that they have a Neptune trine Venus aspect between the two of them in the planetary department. And Neptune has to do with deception, fantasy, and rose-colored glasses. You tend to idealize the romance and the fantasy with each other. Now, his Dejanira and Fox and Lachesis conjuncts her descendant. And Dejanira has to do with being a victim. And Fox has to do with sly and cunning behavior. So I think that she was a victim of this energy, but there's a possibility that she might end this because of Lachesis conjuncting her descendant, and that has to do with endings and death. His Taureau conjuncts her vertex and Mars. The vertex is a very important point in the Synastry chart. So whatever conjuncts your vertex from the other person, you'll receive those energies. So in this case, like I said, his Taureau is conjuncting her vertex, but it's also conjuncting her Mars, the war planet. So I think that he can be bossy and maybe even a bully because her point of fortune conjuncts his Nessus, and that can lead to abusive behavior because his Mars is squaring her ascendant. And he has Mars in Aries, and that is indignity, and they can be aggressive when you have Mars in Aries. Now, Mars squaring her ascendant, selfish behavior, inconsiderate, or domineering. And also his Mars squares her Uranus and her Neptune. And when Mars is squaring Uranus, that leads to a possible, a volatile energy, and it could become explosive over time. Now, his Mars is also squaring her Neptune, and there's a fantasy here. There's a fantasy, sex energy, and illusion that usually isn't sustainable long term. Her Neptune trines her Venus natally. She has the tendency to over-idealize love and relationships, which coincides with her Neverland and Pan conjuncting his Venus. That has Peter Pan energies. I will get to that, but I need to point out that his Bluet conjuncts his Juno natally. And Juno has to do with marriage, and Bluet has to do with, well, it's pretty much self-explanatory. He blew it in his marriage, and that's in his natal chart. Also, his Chiron is conjuncting his Nemesis, Groom, and Medusa. Whatever conjuncts your Chiron in your natal chart, this is going to be lessons for you in life. It's going to bring you the most painful experiences. And in his case, his Chiron is conjuncting his Nemesis. That has to do with betrayal. And it's conjuncting his Groom, obviously, coincides with his Juno, which is conjuncting his Bluet, and his Groom is also conjuncting his Medusa. Wow. So Medusa in Greek mythology, I'm sure you're familiar with her. She had, she had beautiful hair, and then her hair turned into snakes, and she lured men into a trap. And when men looked at her, she turned them into stone. So I think that he is the female, he's the Medusa, of a male Medusa, so to speak, and it's conjuncting his groom and nemesis. This all makes sense to me. Now, his Juno and Dolores conjuncts her IC. Dolores has to do with pain and suffering. So in this case, since it's conjuncting her IC, since at the bottom of the chart, it's on the cusp of the house that rules the home and the family. So either he brings a painful marriage into this relationship, or it could work the way of he brought the pain and suffering from his marriage into the relationship. Or, like I said, or they'll have a painful marriage behind the scenes, because her Melpomene conjuncts her Juno natally in her 7th house. And the 7th house rules marriages, committed relationships. This is unfortunate because Melpomene conjuncting her Juno, that has to do with she has Chiron in the 7th house, and that has to do with painful relationships, but Melpomene has to do with tragedy. So now we have a tragedy in her marriages, and there's painful instances with long-term or committed relationships. Now I'm going to go back to the Neptune fantasy. Her Neverland and Pan conjuncts his Venus. It's like the Peter Pan movie. Peter Pan was based on the Greek god Pan, who played the flute, and Neverland has to do with not wanting to grow up. It's all fun and games because his Venus, his Sun, and Mercury overlays into her 5th house, which is what the 5th house represents. So, they're together, they're having fun and games. Neverland, you don't want to grow up. We've got Peter Pan. It's almost like they're in a real life musical or movie. And because his Neptune and Grimm conjuncts her ascendant and her Neptune, Grimm's fairy tales. Neptune has to do with illusions, which ties back to their Neptune trining Venus aspect. This looks to me, it's almost like a very strong indication of a Neptunian relationship. So her Neptune, which is retrograde, made her very susceptible to his charms of fantasy and illusions, which would actually tie back to his Fox conjuncting her descendant, because that has to do with sly and cunning behavior. But her Neptune conjuncts her ascendant. So she lives in a musical. In a place that takes her out of an earthbound existence. And because his Neptune and Grimm conjuncts her ascendant and Neptune, this fortifies that energy. She doesn't splash in the shallow, this girl. She dives in deep. She dives into the deep end of arts and music. And in this case, the fairy tale transcendent illusionary love. And this goes back to her Neptune trining Venus and that same aspect between the two of them. Now, his Mercury conjuncts her Holiday, Pan, and Casanova. Again, there's more indications here of music, and he thinks he's like on a holiday. This is great for him. Mercury is the thinking and talking planet. So he's probably said to her, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm on a holiday," and there's music involved, and this dreamy-like existence. And her Casanova is there, so he's like, he said or thought, "Yeah, she does it for me," because her paradise, you can't make this up. Her paradise and Eros conjuncts his Lilith, that has to do with raw sexuality. Paradise is there. And Eros has to do with eroticism, and his Lilith is conjuncting his Ceres. So there's a very strong sexual bond, and he loves this. This is, it really ties back to their Neptune squaring Mars aspect. Now, his narcissist conjuncts her north node. I've talked about this before. Whatever conjuncts your north node from the other person is going to be the theme of the relationship. Now, I don't know if he's a narcissist. I will say that because of all the other aspects in this chart, it's really a strong Neptunian fantasy sort of connection. But with narcissist conjuncting her north node, this has to do with selfishness and a lack of empathy. And maybe that has to do with his marriage to Lily. Maybe he doesn't have empathy towards that. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have validation, but narcissist conjuncting her north node, there's selfishness there, and that would tie back to his Mars squaring her ascendant. Now, her Venus conjuncts his Alma, Apophis, and Nymph. Nymph has to do with being very strong sexual desires, and Alma, her Venus conjuncting his Alma, there's a soulful connection that they feel together. But Apophis is conjuncting her Venus, and I've seen this before, and this can indicate that the feelings that she has for him are going to go away. She will either fall out of love with him or end the relationship. Maybe she will wake up from her Neptune fog one day and realize that this was just an illusion. And it may have to do with the fact that his Elu conjuncts her sun. And Elu has to do with messy situations, things that you really don't want around in your relationship. It doesn't bring harmony. I mean, messy situations, which would tie back to the divorce or the cheating, that alleged cheating with him and his wife, ex-wife, Lily. And, they have a child together, and that's not going to go away. So we'll see what happens between these two. And that's all I have today. And I hope you enjoyed this interpretation. And I'll be back shortly with more Synastry charts. So if you're interested, hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop. Have a great day. Good luck, Ariana.